Hi everyone, Reverend Beth Simmons here with another midweek moment. I am out near my garden, my veggie garden, in a break between the rain showers today. It is muggy and buggy a little bit, so if you see me swatting my arms around, it's because the mosquitoes think I'm a delicious treat. So I just wanted to share a little postcard that I have. And it sits sort of in the window of my current dining room near my coffee pot. Oops, there goes the camera. Let's not do that. And let's see if I can get this to stand up again. And so I look at it every day, and it says, and I don't know if you can see it. Here we go. It says, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And it's attributed to Arthur Ashe. And it comes from a permaculture educational group. And so it's got some great, it's got a map, like a property map, and some chickens and some fencing and a jar of plums and a couple other things, some mushrooms and such. But it really struck me this week because on Sunday, after our worship service, a group of us from our congregation participated in an exercise called asset mapping, which sounds super corporate, but was really a great exercise to sort of get our imaginations working a little bit and to focus on what we have, where we are. So often we feel a sense of lack in our churches, in our lives, in our families. We need something. Whether it's an actual physical thing or some sort of, more ethereal sort of way of being, right? We need to be happy, or we need to feel settled, or we need to feel motivated, or, we need to have our relationships be figured out. And then we can do something else or make changes, or we can pursue our dreams. And the purpose of the asset mapping was really to really assess what we have as what are our assets as a congregation and in the wider community, and sort of as a congregation as a whole, and in who makes up our congregation, right? So you want to think of the personal aspect, like we have a bunch of former and current teachers in our congregation. We have some artists in our congregation. We have really musically inclined folks in our congregation. We have hard workers in our congregation. All of these things. And then beyond the people, right? So our physical space, the community partners that we have that we could potentially work with. So like we have we have the Harris Center, which is a conservation education organization, and we have the Grapevine, which is a great family resource center, and so on and so forth. So it just made me think, looking at this postcard, as I do when I'm making coffee in the morning, about God's call, because this is the question the question we were pondering, that sort of filtered through all our interactions during this session on Sunday was, what do we feel is God calling us to as a congregation in this season, or something like that. But the thing is, it's never going to be anything that is beyond our reach at the moment. So we can't it can be beyond, it might be beyond where we are now and involve great change in the meantime, transformation, metamorphosis, right? But it's never going to start there. God is never going to call us to be something right away, which we are not now. Does that make sense? So we have to start where we are with what we have and do what we can. And by doing so, if there is transformation involved, then we begin the steps of transformation. You know, a caterpillar doesn't wake up one day. I mean, we use this metaphor a lot in church because it's a great metaphor. But a caterpillar doesn't just like go to sleep and wake up as a butterfly. It starts as a caterpillar. It eventually becomes a butterfly, but it starts as a caterpillar. And it starts the transformation as a caterpillar. It wraps itself in its chrysalis as a caterpillar, using its skills that it would not have if it were a butterfly. Does that make sense? You know, the other thing about this is start where you are, and I would say look to the long game. So I'm at my garden right now, and I'm going to shift and turn around for a second so you can actually see my garden. It's a decent sized garden at this point. It did not start out that way. And it will not stay this way. We are using the soil that we have, and we are amending it as we need to and want to. But we are using what we have now, and doing what we can. And that goes for time, energy, resources of all kinds, right? Start where you are. You have a dream. You may not be able to pursue that dream full time right now. That might be your dream, right? To full time be doing something different than you are right now. You have to start where you are, though. Maybe it's doing one thing towards your dream. As a congregation, assessing where we are right now is really important. Everybody has dreams and goals and thoughts about where we want to be. Caveat, they're often about where we were. That's a whole different thing. But you have to start with what you have. You might dream of having a congregation of 100, 200 folks. It's not going to happen next week. Like next week, you're not going to walk in and there's going to be 100 people sitting in the pew. But maybe there's 25. And maybe you, instead of worrying about the 75 that are not in the congregation yet, you focus on the 25 that you have, and you nurture them, and you identify their gifts and their interests and their needs, and you work with that. And then, hopefully, somebody else will notice and say, oh, this is a place of nurturing and of growth. Maybe I want to be there too. And then it'll be 27 and 29 and 30. Maybe. But maybe not, because maybe God's not calling you to grow numbers. Maybe God is calling you to really dig in and nurture the people that you have, because they have ideas that will help you go where God wants you to go. And it's not what you have imagined yet. This is sort of a rambly little midweek moment. But I would encourage you, because I found this asset mapping session to be really generative and productive for considering all of the things that we already have. and was not an exhaustive list by all means, but one of the things that came up, one of the things that was noticed was how very little overlap there was in all of our lists of our assets, which means people notice different things, people care about different things and put value in different things, and it is having all those together that make the church what it is, right? One body, many members. I would suggest, and I might do this myself, I think I'm going to do this myself, that you do an asset mapping session for yourself. So sit down with a generative question, consider a question. It might be, what is God calling me to next in this season of life? It might be some other question. Some other question. How might I serve God? Might be, where should my priorities be in this season? Any kind of question like that. And then start jotting down. And the way we did this was on like separate pieces of paper, and we put them up on a board. But you could, jot them down on a list if you want. Your assets, your financial assets, your physical assets, your spiritual assets, your intellectual assets, all your assets, right? Your sort of intangible assets like time. Try to get as many as you can for like 5 minutes. Just right. It's a brainstorm. Don't question, don't judge. You repeat, whatever. Just write them down. And then think of that question. What is God calling me to right now? And see if there are actions you can take based on some of the assets you have. That might be an answer to that question. So you're not really seeking an answer, but maybe nudges. Like, oh, I really have all these assets right now. What might I do with those? How might those be useful right now? Because gosh, even if we're lacking in one area, for instance, maybe our financial assets are not flush at the moment, or maybe our time assets are very stretched, or our energy, or we don't have a lot of people around us for support, right? We might balance those out in other ways, and we might use one to gain the other. That makes sense. So, for instance, if our financial assets are a little bit are stable, or maybe even a little bit more flush than they have been, we've got a little wiggle room, but our time assets are none. We just have all the things. It's okay to use the financial assets to gain the time assets. For instance, to hire someone to come in and clean for you once a month, to get a delivery service, which is tricky in this rural area, but there are some showing up, right? Whatever. And vice versa, right? Exchange your time for something that is, if you have more time at the moment, maybe your time needs to be used for some sort of part-time job that could help strengthen your financial. Again, just an example. But I just want us to think about where God calls us. Might be really far away from where we are right now. But it always starts where we are with what we have. It's never a leap, a jump off a cliff, an overnight instant metamorphosis. And that goes for justice too. It can sometimes seem a slow slog. But it starts where we are. The one thing we can do today even. No, thank you, bug. Start where you are. And ask, where are you if you're not sure? Use what you have. What are your assets? Do what you can. What can you do? Maybe it's small. Maybe it's not small. Maybe it's nothing. That's okay too. Maybe it's resting, which is something. But there's a bumblebee on these asters, beautiful purple asters over here. It's distracting me. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and that you're able to look at your life, do a little self-examination, or look at the church. If you weren't at the asset mapping question, we will have a little report coming out about it, but I encourage you to think about that. You can absolutely sort of participate, think about those things. What are our assets, and what might God be calling us to do in these coming days, weeks, months, years together, because I'm curious and a little bit excited about what that might be. And I hope you are too. Have a lovely rest of your week, as I said again. And I will see you soon. And if you would like to join us this Sunday at 9:45, we would be so happy to have you with us. It's creation season of creation. We are going to be it's going to be Wilderness Sunday, and it's certain to be a generative, thought-provoking time with beautiful music as well. So I hope to see you there if you're local, and I am thinking of you virtually. If you're not, mosquito just took a snack from me. But I hope, no matter what, that you are well and that you know how loved you are, because I love you and God does too.